We are live and welcome to the final episode of this short mini series called Above the Line. Suzanne, welcome back. So today I'm really excited for this episode because we're going to talk about the neuroscience behind all of the emotional regulation that we've been talking about over the rest of the series. And I'm going to try to stick to some talking points that I have because I could stand on a soapbox and talk about this for like 8 hours straight because I really geek out on all the science stuff. But I'm going to try not to do that because I know people want to just listen to this in a really short space of time. So we're going to try to condense some of the neuroscience, but help everybody understand how we are wired in our brains and in our biology, and how some of our responses that we've been talking about through the series is actually hardwired, and how some of the tips that we've been giving you as we've gone along helps you rewire and re-regulate and change some of your biology so you can be in control and in the driver's seat of your experience. So that's what we're going to dive into today. So Suzanne, what do you think about the neuroscience, and why do you think knowing the neuroscience is important?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm also excited because it's really cool when you geek out. So you have my permission to geek out, and because I think that's when we're going to see you be in flow. And it is important because if we just walk around on autopilot, we react to things and we feel, I don't know, we're not even conscious of it. And so everything that I think you and I are talking about is to give people choice and options. And I think understanding the neuroscience is one more piece of information that can help us to not be a victim of what's going on, but actually take control of it and work with it.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? So we have autonomy and we can choose to harness our biology to help us have the life experience that we want to have. And that's sort of what today's episode is about. So we're going to break it down into 4 sections. We're going to talk about the science of emotional states. We're then going to talk about our triggers and the refractory period and how we respond. We'll talk about techniques for how we can shift above the line, and then how we build awareness to do this on a day-to-day basis and have this become second nature to us, which is a theme we've been talking about as we've been going through all of the little episodes in this series. So let's start with the science of our emotional states. And I'm challenged to do this in a couple of minutes versus like a couple of hours. I'd love to dive into the brain and how our brain is made up and our heart, but I'm going to keep it super simple. So if we think about our brain, so we have this frontal lobe area in our brain, and that's where we do our executive functioning, our reasoning. It's our logical brain. We do a lot of analytical thinking in this frontal lobe area. And we also have a limbic brain, which we call our emotional brain. And that's an older part of our brain that basically was wired to help us survive years and years and years ago, right? So when we were here, we were living out in the wild. If we weren't primed to watch out for danger, we wouldn't have survived as a species. So the limbic brain, or the emotional brain, is that area of our brain that has helped us evolve and kept us alive as a species. And then we have the cerebellum, which is the seat of our unconsciousness. It's where all of our habits are hardwired, where all of our programming is. And so that sort of helps us when we really know and when we really do something. Like some people have a hard time rhyming off their PIN number, for instance. I have to put my fingers on a pad to go, yeah, I know what my PIN number is. I'm not going to say it out loud here on this call. But so, riding a bike, all of those things that are hardwired in our body, that information resides in our cerebellum. So when we're in a stress response, what happens? Well, our body automatically fires. Our brain starts to fire off some neurochemicals. And those neurochemicals are coming from various parts of our brain, but essentially they're making their way to the adrenal glands in our body, and it's telling the adrenal glands in our body to fire off cortisol, the stress hormone. And our brain and our body is connecting in with each other. And, our brain is going to connect in and say, okay, body, how are you feeling? Heart, how are you feeling? And it's like, oh, you're feeling stressed. Okay, let me keep firing those neurotransmitters, neurochemicals, so that it fires off more of the stress hormone. And when we're in that stress hormone, that stressed state, we often call it fight or flight response. When we're in that response, our body is going through this massive physiological change. There's a cascade of 1,400 chemicals that's cascading throughout our body. Our breathing changes, our heart rate changes, glucose moves out into our arms and legs so that we can flee whatever situation we're in. And we've diverted energy from growth and repair of our internal organs. And, I could go on this, but I'm just going to pause there. I just want to say one last thing. Human beings are the only mammal that have perfected triggering the stress response and keeping the stress response going by thought alone. So if a deer is out in the woods and it's outrunning some sort of predator, or the zebras in the Serengeti or whatever, and it outruns the lion, it's going to go back to eating grass, and it's gone back to homeostasis within about 30 seconds or a minute, and it's back to normal balance. A human being with their thought process, that famous inner critic that we talk about in our analytical brain, that can keep the stress response going, and our body doesn't know the difference. Our body and our brain doesn't know the difference for a stress response that's been triggered by thought alone versus a real live stress response that's happening due to a situation that we're in. So I think that's really important for everybody to know. But I'm going to pause and just, Suzanne, what do you see about this, and how do you see it play out in settings at work?
Yeah, so maybe I just want to comment on, because I love this image about the different parts of the brain, and I'm thinking, yeah, so what? Why should people care? And I said a moment ago, it's because we have choice to act differently. And people may still think, yeah, but so what? But I think the real reason why we care about this is because when we are in that limbic brain, we're just not operating in our best. We're not making the emotional response wrong. As you said, is built into us, right? Is that innate way of reacting. But if we stay there for too long, beyond that initial trigger, we are not our best self. We're not able to collaborate in the best way. And I think maybe we might come on to this later. It causes me stress. It burns out my body because it is more taxing on the body to be in that state, because I'm preparing to run away, right? Yeah. And to your actual question, how do I see this play out? Well, I coach a lot of managers who actually spend a lot of time responding, or should I say reacting. I have 100 emails. I've just been away from my desk for 10 minutes. Oh my God, it's overwhelming. Or oh, my collaborator's telling me we can't get this done on time. And this is constant reflex of the brain triggering those chemicals. I need to respond. I need to be doing something. It's survival. Oh my God, something is threatening me. It's that constant, and it's very taxing on the body if we're not aware of it. We take it with us home as well. We're still angry about an email when we get home. We might still be angry about it the next morning.
Yep. Yeah, that replaying, right? The pattern of replaying in your brain. And I do think it's really important to acknowledge that if you are operating in this state of mind and this state of body for the majority of your day, then at the end of the day, you're typically fried, like totally exhausted. At the end of the week, you're fried. And this is what leads to burnout, because there's no recovery time baked in. Imagine an athlete that was running back-to-back marathons and not actually taking a break to recover in between training sessions or in between marathons, right? It wouldn't be very long before that athlete was completely burned out. And it's the same for us with whatever it is we're dealing with and however we're dealing with it. So I think the important takeaway is that our body has this innate reaction. It fires this biology that's innate in us. However, we can call time out on that, and we can change that. Suzanne, do you want to describe the fight or flight response before we keep going?
Yeah. And I also want to remind people that we talked about resilience in a previous episode, which actually really ties in with this. So yeah, so we have these, as you're saying, these responses, and normally we talk about the fight, flight, or the freeze. And I want to add the fawn response too, which is less talked about. So if at work, let's say I get triggered, let's talk first about the fight response, which I think is quite common. I get angry. I actually want to assert myself. It's as if I want to fight my opponent, but I'm not using my fist, but I'm perhaps using my words. Maybe actually people try to make themselves bigger. You know, you do see people do this, like, and I think it's just like they're inflating themselves to make themselves a bit more scary, and it works. You know, it's scary when your co-workers begin to blow themselves up and raise their voice. It's all part of the fight response. You know, I raise my voice. You don't know what you're talking about. Listen to this. Whatever. That's, oh, I feel it in my body. It's yeah, I want to confront. I want to fight. Then we have the opposite, which is the flight, running away from. So, whoa, I'm not going into this conversation right now. I don't have all the information. Can we talk about it later? Can we talk about it tomorrow? Or I don't know, I don't have an answer for you right now. Or so I'm doing anything I can to kick the can further down the road and not talk about it right now. Or I might physically remove myself from the situation. Sometimes it happens that people actually walk out of a meeting room in extreme cases. So let's come back when you calm down. That's actually also fleeing, right?
Yep.
Then we have the freeze response, which I think is quite a severe response. It actually can stem from people previously in their lives being in situations as kids when they had no option other than to stay put. So the freeze response can be quite a big response because I'm doing nothing. I'm frozen. I'm unable to speak back. I'm just frozen. It's like a black screen comes down. I don't know what to do. And it's very uncomfortable for people who experience it. There are ways to overcome it, but that's the freeze response. Then the last one, which is the fawn, which I became aware of when I wrote this book. Actually, I hadn't come across the fawn response before. But it's a response where I want to appease the other person. So I do anything I can to accommodate. So it's a way to soothe the other person. And I don't want to. I don't want to soothe, but I do it because it's a survival mechanism. So instead of the tiger eating me, I'm trying to feed the tiger what the tiger wants. Probably a bad analogy because I don't know if I can do that with a tiger, but I'm trying to accommodate and to please them all I can so that I stay alive.
Yep. So people pleasing and even maybe perfectionism falls a little bit into that fawn response too, right? So I must show up as a perfect human being. I must work until midnight to get this deck so it looks completely perfect because I need them to like me, right? And so I think there's a little bit of that can go in there too.
Yeah, it's so good you say that because I'm worried otherwise that I'm going to fall out of favors. I'm worried I'm not going to be good enough. I'm worried I'm not going to get that next project. I'm worried I'm not going to be promoted. I'm worried people think I'm not capable.
Yeah.
So it's a survival mechanism. It's a survival strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So good examples. So let's talk about the next stage, right? So when we're triggered, so we've been triggered, we've fired this stress response, we've got this biology that's kicked in between our body and our brain, and that has happened, right? And so the period right after an emotional trigger is called a refractory period. And the duration of that refractory period and what we do in that refractory period depends, and it's a choice point, right? So we can choose to inject the space that we've talked about on prior episodes, do the HeartMath breathing technique, and then come back in a more coherent state, or we can just sort of keep going with it and react. And what's interesting, so I just said that human beings can keep the stress response going by thought alone. There's people who keep that stress response going for for hours and days, and we say, well, what's wrong with them? And it's like, well, they're in a mood. Or, you know, it goes on for weeks and months, and, you know, we say, well, what's wrong with them? Well, you know, that's just their personality, you know. Or, you know, they were passed over for a promotion 2 years ago, and if they've never gotten over it. Their, you know, wife divorced them, husband divorced them 5 years ago, and they've never gotten over it. And so they're carrying that stress response with them, and that negativity with them, and that refractory period's gone on for a massive period of time until it's become ingrained in who they are. And when it's that level and that situation, it can become quite tricky to change it. But even at that level, you can change it. And I talk about that on some of the workshops and videos I do, because my own personality was, you know, high anxiousness, high stress, but it came across as someone who was successful and perfectionist, because I was in that situation, always going to the nth degree to do the work. And you know, I still do a good job, but I don't carry that same emotional stress and that anxiety with me, because I've been able to implement the tools. And that's why I'm here talking about this. So I think that trigger happens, we go into this refractory period, and it offers that choice point. And so even if you are listening to this and some of this is resonating, and you're thinking, oh, you know what, I've been firing that for a long time, I've been in that state for a long time, you know, don't lose heart. You can start to implement these tools and start to change your rewiring. And without going into too much detail about what happens, you know, essentially there's a concept called neuroplasticity, and that's our brain's ability to change and build new neurons based on information that we're learning. So as people are listening to this today, they're actually firing new neurons. If this new information, they're firing new neurons in their prefrontal cortex, in their neocortex, and that's helping them to digest this information. And as you start to put these tools into action, you're actually firing different neurons in your brain and causing different connections to become more embedded. And if you start to move away from those old patterns and those old reactions that you had in the past, then those neurons that are associated with those patterns will start to prune away over time. If you just keep coming back to, you know what, I'm just going to keep coming back to this, I'm going to keep coming back and doing this work and making this change, over time you will build these new neurons and those old ones will go away. That's all called neuroplasticity, and it's really well documented. I think in the last 10-20 years, we've gotten much better at being able to see brain scans, analyze the brain, and use techniques to be able to really dig in and see what's going on there. So it's very encouraging to know that, you know, you don't have to live with this going forward. You can make a choice to change it. And some of these very simple tools that we're giving you can be life-changing tools. So I'm going to hit pause on myself here, and Suzanne, give you a chance to jump in here with your thoughts around the refractory period and triggers.
Yeah, I think there's so much to comment on, actually. And I like the first point, I think, is change is possible, what you're saying about neuroplasticity. It takes time to change. It's not easy to change. It is possible to change if we keep working at it. And I think that's a very important point that we want to emphasize. I have heard, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I have heard that the time that this trigger happens in the brain is about 90 seconds.
Well,
so
yeah.
If you see something happening, oh, there's a red light and there's a car in front of me, whatever, bang, my body reacts, and the chemicals will run for 90 seconds minimum.
It can go 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Everybody's a little different, but yes, a really short window of time where your body's innate response kicks in.
Right. And so most of us, we still think about that conversation or that car or that thing that triggered us hours, days after. And so, yes, the initial response, because that's innate in our biology and it's there can save our lives, right? It will kick in. But anything beyond the 2 minutes is effectively, as you're saying, it's our own thoughts that keep going. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe I was passed over for that promotion. Oh my God, I can't believe that car was driving over for red. So it keeps happening. And I know people who have been known to sulk.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know what sulking is, it means that mm, it's what kids do when
Yeah.
they are offended or angry about something
Yeah.
that they didn't get that they what they wanted. And now I
I'm
think
mad.
I'm mad stroke sad because there's a sadness below it.
Yeah.
And I know adults who have been known to sulk at work. And when I call out the behavior, just the other day, a friend, and he was like, "Oh, you're right. I do that. I can sit for days and sulk if I'm, and then I just kind of, And the problem with that behavior is that you think you're punishing other people. That's why people do it, but you're punishing yourself. You are, in our terminology, you're below the line when you sulk or when you carry this emotional trigger with you for a long time. You're not able to think your best thoughts. You're cutting yourself off from collaboration and moving forward. So it's in our own best interest to move forward quickly. And I see this with people I coach again, because sometimes they carry these stresses for a long time. They carry the things home. They dream about it at night. So it is very important that we can become aware of our stresses and that we can actively do something to move into a different state.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And that rumination robs you of joy.
Yeah.
Like excessively ruminating in our brain and replaying past events over and over and over is stealing joy from the present moment. It's stealing your ability to be at peace, to be content, and to be productive and creative and innovative. So, if you want to think about it from that angle as well, that rumination that you're putting yourself through is robbing yourself of those gifts that's innate for all of us.
And maybe I want to add one other thing, because why do you and I, we've both been in these jobs running projects where we were tense, right? Can I say that on your behalf as well?
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that it was helping me to move forward, because that's what you need. You need that drive to take action. You need that frustration to get people to do things. So I think that's often why we are in this triggered mode, because we think it's helping. I would challenge everybody listening. Yes, we want you to take action and move forward, and you don't have to be stressed about it. You can take action from a place of openness and expansion rather than an angry contraction, and it's much more powerful when you do that.
Yeah, I think that's so important to just mention that the flip side of the stress response is this openness around creativity and innovation and flow. And I'm sort of working to pull a whole new workshop together on flow and really looking at how do you move, like deliberately and intentionally move from that state of mind into a state of mind where you have peace and flow and focus, and life and work and everything you're trying to do can be so much easier. You can get so much done in a tiny sliver of time if you're in a creative and flow mindset. Versus over here, you've got such a narrow focus on your problems. You're really dialed in. Remember, we talked about the grizzly bear at a door in a previous episode. So you're really dialed in on that grizzly bear. You can't see the forest for the trees, so you can't see big picture solutions. You can't innovate. And if your entire team's running in that type of a situation, they can't be creative and innovative. You're recreating the same problems over and over. So this is really important. If you're a leader in an organization listening to this, shifting your team into a state of mind where they are not running in the stress response. They are more creative, they're more innovative, they've got more flow. We're wired as team members and as humans to be pro-social. So all of these neurochemicals that we're firing around focus and flow help us become more trusting as a team, more collaborative as a team. And if you look at a team that sort of works really well together, even if they're challenging each other and there's some areas of tension, that's okay, because they're able to challenge each other, they're able to move through tension and be able to come out on the other end with better results. That's a healthy, productive, collaborative team, and they're not running in a stress response. So it's really important, I think, to just describe what those two scenarios look like, because you can decide that you're going to move your team from this type of scenario to one that's more creative.
Yep, amen.
Okay, so I'm looking at my notes. Where were we? So So I wanted to mention about brain waves. So, I think in a prior episode, I talked about high beta. So if someone is in a stress response, they're in what we call a high beta brainwave, which means that they're sort of cycling way up here, and they're only able to take in information at the same level that's been presented to them. So they're really hyper focused in on the problem they're trying to solve, and they need to come down. Like you and I right now are probably in mid-range beta, Suzanne, because we're here having this conversation and we're trying to stick to some points that we wanted to talk about so we don't go off track and make this 6 hours long. So we're probably in a mid-range beta. I would imagine that people listening are probably in low-range beta because they're taking this in, they're connecting the neurons. If we were meditating, we'd be heading down to alpha, theta. If we're going to sleep at night, we go through all of these brain waves and we wake back up into a beta brainwave. And so it's important to just know that your brainwave plays into this as well. And as we go forward, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. So where are we? So are we ready? Should we talk about techniques to shift above the line?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So I think we've talked about this, it's probably one of the most mentioned techniques on all of these episodes is the HeartMath quick coherence technique. And so I know that in the last episode, we actually all did it together and we showed how it worked. What I want to do is break it down right now and talk about why it works. And if you're listening to this, you could do this technique as we're going along. So what it's doing is regulating our breath in our heart area, and it's regulating our heart rate variability, and that helps calm down and fire up our parasympathetic nervous system, which is there to help our body regulate. And so as we're breathing in and out of our heart, which is the very first thing that we say to do, we say breathe more deeply and breathe for a longer period in, and then breathe out for the same period. That cadence of breathing in and breathing out when you're mentally counting to, let's say, 5 or whatever you want to count to in your brain, that's engaging your parasympathetic nervous system and calming down your entire nervous system. And so it's sending a signal from the heart to the brain, and the brain checks in with the heart and saying, hey, how you doing, heart? And it's actually in the amygdala, which is a piece of our brain that fires stress. The amygdala actually has some cells that are very like heart cells, so they're electrically wired to between our heart and our brain. And so it's checking in and brain's going, hey, heart, how you doing? And the heart's like, oh, I'm nice and calm. And then the brain's going, okay, good, you're calm. Let me just, maybe let's open up and fire some dopamine. So they'll send neurotransmitters and neurochemicals and down to the different glands in the body to fire up dopamine or serotonin or those chemicals that make us feel good. And it's our heart is actually breathing at a cadence. It's called heart rate variability. And if you want to dive more details into this, go to the HeartMath website, and it describes what heart rate variability is. But that's just basically how our heart signals to our brain that we are in a calm state of being. So pause for a second there and see, Suzanne, anything you want to mention about that before we talk about the next step?
I absolutely love this technique, and we also shared an app because they have an app, and you can actually, I've done this, you can use the camera on your phone to measure your heart rate, and the app will show you when you get into coherence. I was blown away by that. I thought it was interesting use of technology.
Yeah, and I will put a plug in. They have HeartMath has a tool called the Inner Balance, which you can connect to your phone via Bluetooth, and it actually listens to your heart rate and it measures your coherence. And you can use that along with their free meditation techniques to help build your coherence, your heart rate variability. And that's actually a tool that helps you build that coherence and build resiliency in your body. So great tools that really work and can help if you're on that side where you're, sort of high stress, high anxiety, and you really want some tools that will help you. Their tools are really, really good.
And I want to also just remind people why we keep coming back to the breath, because it's the only part, I think, of the autonomous nervous system that we can take conscious control of. So it's a direct hack into controlling our biology. It is just phenomenal. So it's there waiting for us to breathe consciously. It's all free.
Yeah, it's all free, and it's part of our wiring. there.
Yeah.
It's in our biology. So the next step in the quick coherence method, when we talk about we're breathing in and out for a period, we get to a calm cadence where we've got that going. And then we tell you to activate a regenerative feeling, such as a feeling of gratitude or appreciation or care and compassion. And so what that's actually doing is sort of shifting and telling the brain to release those neurochemicals that are associated with oxytocin or oxytocin or serotonin or dopamine. And so it's basically calming down and relaxing our body, basically based on that gratitude. And there's so much science now around the role of gratitude in creating a vibe of well-being in our body. And there's lots and lots of gratitude practices, even just doing something as simple as keeping a gratitude journal at the end of the day and just writing down all of the things that you're noticing that you're grateful for. That starts to wire your brain into noticing and looking for those gratitude events. I think on some of my webinars, I talk about it being glimmers. So you're looking for the glimmers in your day. You're making note of what those are. And then your brain becomes primed to look for more of those things that you can be grateful for. And again, you're rewiring your brain as you're doing that all the time. And then, so then what we're doing is shifting into heart coherence. So the heart and brain are now in coherence together, and the brain is checking in with the body and adjusting to the body with sending the chemicals that the body needs and vice versa. And if we reacted and went into a stress response, that they would just shift really quickly and send out different neurochemicals. So the longer you can do that exercise, and we talked about it on an earlier episode where we're prepping for the day and we're actually doing that exercise at the start of the day. If you can prime your body by doing that exercise at the start of the day, you're sort of priming and rewiring and setting your body up for success. And HeartMath has some studies that show if you do this, they call it a heart lock-in, where you're doing the quick coherence method, you hold a regenerative feeling, and then you pulsate that feeling throughout your body, and you really hold that feeling for like 5 or 10 minutes in your body. And they've studies that show the effect of doing that for a period of 6 weeks on a person's well-being, and it's remarkable. So just doing something as simple as that for yourself every day in 5 to 10 minutes can make a lot of difference in how you're feeling and how you're experiencing life. So Suzanne, I'll pause and let you chime in with your thoughts around all of that.
Well, I'm attending a HeartMath course at the moment, and this is what we're doing every week. And so I'm challenging myself to do that. It's beautiful. It works. It's not the only technique that we have available, but I think it's, as I said, one of the more powerful ones, if not the most powerful one.
Yeah. And I think what's important to know is that, again, you can do this while you're standing talking to somebody, and they don't need to know that you're doing this, right? You're just sort of rebalancing yourself and breathing in, and it becomes as natural as just breathing, right? So if you practice it.
And I was on site running a leadership program last week, and several times we did it with our group. And because I'm becoming more comfortable using these techniques as well, and you feel the whole room change. Yeah. Because people are tuning into their own hearts, and you just feel the energy shift.
Yeah. And you know, it's really interesting when you say that. So I've started to do this technique at the start of workshops. Especially if I'm talking about neuroscience, I'll put everybody through this technique right out of the gate so that everybody sort of drops in and they're fully present. But if you can train your team on these neuroscience techniques, and they understand the science behind it, and they understand that they can be empowered and their biology is wired this way, then you can drop these types of techniques into challenging periods, and you can use this terminology with your team, and it resonates with them. And so your team can move into this much more coherent state together. And honestly, I think that's the future of work, is where this type of tool becomes more normalized within teams. And, you know, it helps us get to a much a place where we can innovate and we can be more creative, and we can work together much better, much more optimized. And I think people will start to understand that, and we're going to see a lot more of this work being done in organizations. At least that's what I believe, because we can't keep going the way we're going right now, right? Which is high degree of stress, burnout, and disengagement within organizations. Something's got to shift there. So,
and organizations are looking for resiliency techniques, and this is one of them. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so where are we? So I think, Suzanne, do you want to talk about visualization and movement and how that plays into this as well?
Well, so we're saying that the breath is extremely powerful in helping to shift our physiology. And many other things can be powerful as well. So noticing what you're saying to yourself is an important one, because I think what the breath is doing, the breath is hacking into the emotional state. Another hack is to notice our thoughts. What am I saying to myself? Am I saying to myself, oh my God, I can't do this? Or, oh my God, I'm gonna fail, or I used to say to myself, oh, I'm gonna get fired if I don't get all of this done. What are we saying to ourselves? Sometimes it's not conscious, but sometimes we are absolutely feeding ourselves consciously negative thoughts that reinforce that those, I don't want to say negative chemicals, because that doesn't exist, but chemicals that reinforce a state of contraction and stress. So noticing what we're saying to ourselves and choosing a different narrative. That's one that helps. Changing, moving our body, because if we sit hunched over our desk, looking into that screen, and we've received that difficult email, we are in that state. So changing our state, because our physical state is intrinsically linked with our mental and emotional state. Getting up, moving, doing anything we can to stretch or shake our body out, or it also helps to actually lift our sternum. So many postures. You and I were talking about before we started recording how a power pose, people call it power poses, how they can help. So some people walk around the block, just go to the vending machine, have a conversation. So many things work. Nature. I work with some clients who are very blessed, I would say, to have offices in a forest, or certainly with many trees around. That helps balance us. And mostly I would say the people are coached, they know what works for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important, right? There's all of these different options, but it's starting to become more aware of what works for you and your wiring, which is the next step actually is about building awareness. And how do we build awareness of what our personal line is, what it feels like to dip below the line, and how we can bring ourselves back above the line. And so all of these sort of techniques play in there. So building that awareness, I think we said in our episode around awareness that awareness is the foundation of everything. You can't change what you're not aware of. So really starting to recognize, where are you running on autopilot? Where are you going unconscious? What are those patterns that aren't serving you? What's the chatter in your head? What are you ruminating about? And just remembering to call time out on yourself in those situations, and then change, right? Call time out is step number one, and say, you know what, I'm not listening to you anymore. Sometimes I talk to my brain in third person. I'm like, oh, Annmarie, like, really, you're going to go there? We're not going there, Annmarie. I'm not going to do that. I'm not having that conversation. But sometimes that can help, right? I'm not going crazy, but sometimes that can help, just to sort of think about it as this other entity. If you had a friend who was saying this sort of stuff to you, you would not want to be friends with that person for very long, right? Let's all acknowledge that. So, you can just recognize that this is a part of you that's been there to keep you safe, and it's been programmed to keep you safe through all of these patterns, and the way you've experienced life all the way through to now. And now you're dramatically shifting, and you're saying, no, you know what, thank you for the heads up, but I don't need you to keep me safe right now. I actually want to pause and really open myself to think about how I might want to do this differently. So that's essentially what you're doing to your brain. You're sort of turning the dial down on that chatter and that rumination, so you can shift into a more open, curious state of mind. And that's really what the underpinning of resiliency is as well, right? When things happen, it's your ability, you're not going to not react. You're not going to not have an emotional feeling about something. We're not saying, hey, numb down your emotions. We're saying, yeah, you know what? Emotions are going to come up, things are going to happen. And how long is it going to take you to recover from those things? And how are you going to recover from those things?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, everything is so key. So key what you're mentioning there. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Oh, no, that's good. So is there,
you're making me think, definitely.
well, so in prior episodes, we've talked about some tips for building awareness. Suzanne, do you want to talk about what are some of your favorite ways of building that awareness?
Yeah, I actually think this was going on in my mind just a second ago, because the leadership program I was running last week. So people say, yeah, but I forget, you know. So 3 days later, I'm thinking, oh my God, yeah, I this happened, but I forgot in that moment, I forgot to do something. And so the question we look back on people is, what can make you practice that awareness? Because as you said, if you're not aware, you can't change it. You and I also shared, I think in our very first episode, a daily check-in tool. And I think that's what I want to bring up again here. It's that muscle that we need to keep practicing.
Yeah.
We want to be aware, but in the moment we forget. So if we build in just in the beginning a daily check-in with ourselves, could be in the beginning of the day, could be at the end of the day, could be when we close down our work for the day and transition into our private lives, we can kind of reflect what happened today, how much time did I spend in an expansive creative state, and how much time did I spend reacting and being triggered or whatever it is. And just observe. There's no need to judge, just observe. And then perhaps you can do those moments of check-in more frequently. We can also call them mindful moments. Is it whenever you go for a cuppa, you know, as we like to say here in this country, you go to the water cooler, you go to the restroom, have a mindful moment. Where am I right now? How's my body? Am I tense? I'll relax myself. Is my heart beating? Where am I? There's no right or wrong, just building that awareness. And in the beginning, it's like when we learn to dance, we don't know all the dance moves. Is it 1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3? It's not automatic yet. So in the beginning, with the awareness, we need to create those more artificial check-in points for ourselves. Could be with post-it notes, could be an alarm on the phone. We need something rather artificial to help us along. And then at some point, it becomes more automatic for us. So that's what I would say. Create a structure in the beginning. Make it simple, once a day. Yeah, and then at some point you won't need the reminder anymore.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. So our brain actually has a pattern recognition system. And so, we often, if we're trying to change, we judge ourselves like, oh, I fell prey to it again. I did it again. But it's actually really important that you do that reflection at the end of the day, or even at the end of the week, or both. And you say, okay, well, where did I go off kilter? Where did I go off balance? Where did I react in a way that I'm not proud of? And just make note of it, and even write down, well, here's what I would do differently. If I got a chance to do that again tomorrow, here's what I do differently. And your brain absorbs that and recognizes the pattern. And then soon, if you keep applying that very quickly, it could be like the very next time, or maybe it's 2 times later, your brain's going to kick in while you're in the moment. And it's going to go, oh, you're here, time out, breathe, and it'll sort of sound that alarm for you, and you'll recognize it in the moment. But initially, when you're getting started, you're probably going to see it after the fact, and that's okay.
And I want to add some other tips as well, because I am a coach, I'm a professional coach, and coaching definitely helps here. I think one of the biggest roles of a coach is to hold up the mirror for somebody. So that mirror helps the other person to bring self-awareness, to reflect on where they're at, what's happening, what are their behaviors, is it serving them, and whatnot. And even people who don't work with a coach, they can have like peer mentoring. So they can have a buddy, and they can once a month, once a quarter, they can sit down with their buddy to reflect on, again, where they're at, what's been happening. It's not very frequent, but anything is better than nothing. It doesn't replace the other daily rituals, but it could be an addition to those daily rituals. Help keep each other accountable to what you want to change.
Yeah, that is a great note to close on. I think we've talked ad nauseum about all of our favorite tools, so hopefully that's been helpful to people. Hopefully you've gained some insights and you're able to start to put those into action to move above the line and keep yourself above the line, because it's a much more joyful and happier and peaceful place to be, I will say. And so I will challenge you guys to try out some of these techniques in real time and let us know how it goes for you. Suzanne, any final thoughts before we close?
I loved how you geeked out. So hopefully our listeners and viewers enjoyed it too. So yeah, thank you. Thank you to you, and thank you to everybody watching and listening.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care for now. Bye.